And welcome, students, to our final lesson of this unit. We are now going to wrap up with network attacks. So we've discussed several things about keeping your data safe over the network. So some of the strategies we've talked about have related to keeping your personal information secure over networks. However, some things are beyond your control or are deliberate attacks on your personal network. And we're going to look at a couple of those real quick. Often these attacks use things such as social engineering, um, which are tricks that make it seem like you're talking to someone else or that the source is legitimate in order to trick you into compromising your account. Like it might look like it's an email from your bank, for example, and says, "Hey, we've detected unusual activity with your account. Please sign in here, and if you click it, you're on your path towards, being compromised." So let's look at the first one here, which is that of phishing. And notice it's fishing with a PH, not with an F. So we're not going to go out and catch any trout or bass or anything like that. Sorry, no walleye here either. This is after your information. So phishing in this instance is a security risk that it will attempt to trick people over things such as email, text message, phone calls, or even a fake website with the goal to have the victim exchange either money, hand over sensitive information, or even download malware. The most common form of phishing involves tricking the user to hand over like a username and password. And this is either done by linking to a fake version of a site that you trust and asking you to log in, or requesting that you send it through email. Now, the easiest way to reduce the chance of phishing attack is to keep alert for things such as spelling and grammar, because a lot of times there'll be typos. Checking the validity of the return address, so actually look at where is it returning to. Like it might look like it says it's coming from this, but if you actually look at where it's sending to, well, that might be a different story. The next thing to talk about is ransomware, and this has been something that's been kind of in the news a lot recently. Ransomware is actually a type of malware that tries to take over your computer, and if successful, threatens you by denying access to your data and will demand a ransom, typically money or Bitcoin, something like that, in order to restore access to the data upon payment. Sometimes, though, even if you pay the ransom, it's not going to result in a successful release of the data. Like your computer might still be compromised even if you pay it, so that's why you generally don't want to pay the ransom. Now, the malware will make false claims that will shut down the victim's computer. So, for example, it might say, this is the FBI, we seek control of your computer because we detected illegal activity happening. Please, pay the fine in order to release access. Well, these types of attacks are false, all right? But they're very dangerous because they can spread very quickly through a network due to common security flaws and exploits. Because a lot of times you'll have the same computer through the network, and if a person has multiple logins, of course, multiple accounts, it's very easy for the exploit to spread. And as such, it can cripple entire infrastructure. So, for example, like a hospital, for example, might, if they don't quarantine it quickly, it might spread like wildfire. The next thing to talk about is a botnet. All right, and this is going to kind of tie into the next two things that we're going to talk about after this. Botnets are a network of compromised remote control computers, or bots, that have been infected with some type of malware. What typically happens with bots is that they're going to contact a remote server or other bots along this network for instructions from whoever is controlling the botnet. The most common use for botnets is to broadcast email spam, including phishing scams, or they will participate in denial of service attacks. Now, the reason why I bring up botnets is for this next slide, which is that of zombie computers. No, the computer has not become undead. I'm sorry. There's no voodoo involved here either. If your machine, though, has been compromised by malware or has been activated as part of a botnet, there's a very strong possibility that it's what's known as a zombie computer. Now, what reason why we call it a zombie is because it's often going to carry out these criminal actions without you even knowing that's going on. So you'll have no way of detecting that there's any kind of usual activity going on, because a lot of times it's just network traffic. Now, if your machine has been infected, pretty much the most common solution is to completely erase the hard drive, start it over, and then reinstall your operating system, because that will just scrub everything out of there. Now, the kind of related thing to that is that of a DDoS attack. The DDoS, or distributed denial of service attack, occurs when an attacker or attackers attempt to make it impossible for a service delivered. Anyone that's a gamer has probably suffered through one of these at some point in their life because, somebody's turned the DDoS attack on the gamers, and the gamers are like, ah, because everything just goes down. Now, these malicious attacks focus on drowning a system with requests for data, such as hitting web server with so many requests that it crashes on demand, or database being hit with a high volume of queries. The thing to note about this is a perfectly legitimate thing that goes on. Like the computer has no way of knowing whether or not it's a valid or invalid request. Yes, we know that, hey, it's a DDoS attack, it's invalid, but the computer itself doesn't know that it's a invalid request. And because it doesn't know, it can be very difficult, if not impossible, to stop a DDoS attack. So a lot of times they have to do some circumnavigating around things, create some new rules and stuff like that in order to keep this like wave of packets coming in that's overwhelming your server. All right, next we have what are known as man-in-the-middle attacks. And this kind of ties back to that piece we talked about with personal information, particularly about the sniffers that are coming after your information. Man-in-the-middle attacks are attacks that intercept legitimate communication between point A and point B, and they form a fictitious response to the sender. There's two types. There's what's known as an active attack and a passive. Well, the active will intercept the attack, and then they'll alter the data before they send it off. Notice they'll pull some information out, they might tweak it a little bit, and they're going to send it out. All right, so they're actively pulling that information down in order to manipulate it. But the passive attack, they don't care about manipulating the data. All they want to do is just read it. So they capture the data that's been transmitted, they record it, and then they send it off on its way to the original recipient without the attacker's presence being detected. The passive one is in some ways more dangerous because you don't know that the data was ever modified to begin with. Now, these attacks often occur over public Wi-Fi, as those access points, as we've mentioned, have poor or no security and a lack of encryption. So this is just another reason why you should avoid those public Wi-Fi locations, particularly if you're going to be doing any kind of thing that's involving personal data. All right, so avoiding network attacks. Obviously, we've talked about a lot of things here. We want to avoid these things because they're not good for us. They're not good for our data. Well, not all network attacks are kind of unavoidable. Like if you're suffering a DDoS attack and you're playing a video game, not much you can do about it. It's a video game company that's got to deal with it. So you kind of just have to suffer through it or go play something else. You, though, can be proactive in preventing your PC from becoming compromised. For example, keep your operating system and your anti-malware programs up to date. Run regular scans of them. Those little things can make a big difference. Beware also of social engineering tricks designed to capture personal information. If you get a text message that looks like it's a spam message or from an unknown number, it's probably best just to block it because you don't want to click that link because they're trying to get your personal information. Avoid using public Wi-Fi, as I've already mentioned. It's one thing just to fire it up, do a quick Google search to find an answer to something, but if you're logged into, let's say, you go log into, let's say, a social media account, well, now all of a sudden that information has to pass through. Guess what? They now have access to that information. All right, and that's going to wrap it up. It's kind of a shorter one today, folks, but we're kind of wrapping up our unit really fast here, and I will see you when we jump into the next unit, which is going to be a little bit more of some technical aspects. We're going to be talking about some jargon and stuff like that. So we're not quite out of the technical side of the woods yet before we get into some more hands-on stuff, but we're slowly getting there. So I will see you then.